The world's strongest brothers.
All I did in my life was just quit. I would never be able to hold out something. But with the gym, I just had a voice in my head saying, don't quit.
World's strongest man. Europe's strongest man. 5-time Scotland's strongest man.
Mentally, emotionally and physically, we all have to have those attributes to be a pure strongman.
So you're burning over 10,000 calories.
You're literally eating every 2 hours of the day, so
we need to get those calories back in us as quick as we can so we can go again for the following day.
Living with my autism and living out of this superpower and changing it to that is not a negative, it's a positive. I can wake up every single day and be this Superman.
Just a quick one, if you're enjoying The Energy Equation, please do like and follow wherever you get your podcasts. And if you leave us a review, we'll love you forever. Thanks so much.
So, Luke and Tom Stoltman, welcome to The Energy Equation. It's an absolute thrill to have you both here.
Really nice to be here.
Thank you for having us. Interesting. So.
I'm, like many people, I marvel at strongmen. And for those people who don't know you, I'm sat here with world champion strongman, world's strongest man. Luke sat next to his brother Tom with Europe's strongest man, 5-time Scotland's strongest man, the world's strongest brothers. Well, how would you explain yourselves to the person who's not familiar with the world of strongmen?
Oh, geez, how do we explain ourselves? So I guess we're professional athletes. That's what I would say first and foremost. We compete in strongman, which we have to lift very heavy things. We have to be physically very large to do that. Mass usually moves mass. So that's why we're sat here pretty big. But then, on top of that, we're brothers. I'm 10 years older than Tom. We get to travel the world, competing together, lifting together. We work together, have a business together. And we get to come on these podcasts together, which is pretty awesome. So I guess that's kind of us.
And we eat lots of food as well.
We eat lots of food, yeah.
I want to talk about food later because I can't really imagine how much food is eaten. And clearly people will pick up a Scottish lilt, that you are proud Scotsman, representing Scotland around the world. Where's strongman biggest in the world?
I'd say America right now. I think that's where you do the 4 major competitions of the year. World Strongest Man, Rogue Invitational, the Arnold Classic and the Shaw Classic. Those are the 4 titles that every strongman wants. And yeah, London for the kind of fans, USA for the shows. So.
I've been glued. I remember your first title, Tom, actually, which I think came during COVID.
COVID. So it's just me, myself and Luke that actually flew over there, and it was very strange to compete in front of nobody. Like just athletes. But I think the advantage is we had each other. So we had we could kind of get in people's heads. We had the good energy against each other. We were traveling together. So yeah, but it was very, very weird to win a title. And obviously good to celebrate with Luke, but not to celebrate with the family straight away, to celebrate over FaceTime. It was everything felt weird. All the kind of interviews afterwards, all through FaceTime, it didn't feel real. So it was just a very strange situation to be in. So.
Did it feel more real the following year when you won it again?
He's like, yeah, when I had the family there and when I could do travel to do interviews and stuff, that's when it really felt this is the world's strongest man here. So yeah, 2022 was, I think, a bit sweeter for me.
We're sat here, Tom's literally the strongest man in the world, in my opinion, the best strongman in the last however many years. And that's primal, it's almost going back to basics, going back to what it means to be, I don't know, a man as such. It's like you want to be strong, but not just physically, and we'll talk about it later, mentally, emotionally, and physically. We all have to have those attributes to be a pure strongman. And again, we'll probably talk about it more, but what Tom's done through his journey to become that, it's not just the physical, it's the mental and emotional as well. I think that's really quite important to kind of speak about as well.
Hugely important. And I think that before we get into energy, which this is about, that does reflect back on something you talk about frequently, Tom, which was the diagnosis of autism, which was a really important diagnosis because it allowed you to move, from my perspective, looking at some of your previous interviews and hearing your story, move something that was extremely negative as you felt it, to harness it in a positive way. And I think you've referred to it often as your superpower.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it nail on the head there. I think I was diagnosed at 10 years old. So obviously the hardest thing for myself as well, I think my mum and dad is, I'm one of 5, so they had obviously a family to look after as well, and my wee brother sacrificed a lot. I mean, I love playing football. He hated everything to do with football. He'd come to football training with me. Luke would sacrifice his life when he was away when he was back home to, make sure I was all right. Same with my sisters. So everyone didn't really live a normal life because of me. And for myself, being 10, 11-year-old boy, going to school and, acting kind of normal at school, but then having these behaviours and, thinking why is my brother coming to foot with me and he doesn't like it? Why are they doing this kind of stuff? So, getting bullied and all that kind of stuff, to then, I just thought 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, I was never going to have a life. And it was when I went to the gym at 16 years old, that's when Luke had been to the gym, he was competing, it helped his mental state. And I was like to myself, and there was nothing going for me. I was just literally locked in my room like a jail cell and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So that's when Luke said, let's go to the gym and see what happens. And obviously, some of autism, going to the gym, having these big guys look at you, mirrors, it was probably my worst fear. But I had my hood up, which was my supportive blanket. I had Luke there to just do the talking, and he would just tell me, lift this, do this, and just follow his lead. I just followed his lead for months and months and months. The hardest thing with me was obviously Luke was still working offshore at the time there. So when he went away, I was scared in case I would quit, because that's all I was good at, was quitting stuff. If things got hard, I would quit, and that's all I did in my life, was just quit. I would never be able to hold out something. But with the gym, I just had a voice in my head saying, don't quit, this is something you're good at. I was a bigger kid, when I was growing up and everything. I was bigger than my friends. I was physically kind of a big guy, so I think Luke, that's why Luke took me to the gym, because he knew I could do something. But for me, it was the mental and the emotional and the mental kind of stuff that really helped me. I didn't care about being strong. I didn't care about any of that. It was the first few months of being in the gym. I was open. I was talking to people. I started opening up more about autism. I started kind of just channeling it. I started realizing that this is giving me strength that I didn't think I could do. That started just open up. I got girlfriends. I was meeting other people. My mum and dad were smiling. My brothers were smiling. So it was all just becoming a positive in my life instead of a negative like it used to be. And it wasn't until I spoke to kind of a clinical psychologist, fast forward till I was 20 years old, I think, before I won, not 20 years old, 2020, before I won my first World Strongman. Luke had started talking to her, and I still was struggling with kind of the interview side of the strongman and like the kind of crowds and all that kind of stuff. So he just said, Luke again said to me, try it. And for someone with autism to try something new so close to a competition, it was a big risk. And I kind of just said to me, let's do it. What's the worst that could happen? And the first, month or so talking to her really, really affected me, because we were going deep inside my brain where I've never been before. She was really targeting like concrete thinking and how to kind of use my autism to her advantage. But then 4 or 5 months talking to her down the line, I felt like invincible. I kind of started to realise that like this, I could be something special in strongman. I could really be the next big thing. And that was the moment I wrote on Facebook, Tom Stoltman, World Strongman 2021. It's on my social media. I wrote it before I went out to World Strongman, because she had channeled my mind to be that championship mindset and to know that nothing will get in my way. And then the cherry on the cake was obviously winning World Strongman in 2021. But then when I stood on that podium, it was like I had achieved something. Someone with autism that had, no one said in my life when I was 10, 11 years old that I would never be anything. My teacher said, put down on me. Everyone put down on me and said, you're never going to be anything. To then stand on the podium, I was like a super cat. It was like a Superman you watch on TV, just standing above everybody. And these guys that don't have any of this kind of, Asperger's, autism, whatever you want to call it, to be able to beat these guys. And that's where I changed it to a superpower, because like for me, I just felt superhuman. And I just then woke up every single day after that, living with my autism and living out of this superpower, and changing it to that it's not a negative, it's a positive. I can wake up every single day and be this Superman, then I can achieve anything in my life. And that's what I've now done. It used to have a label. It used to be a disability for a lot of kids, a lot of adults, and a lot of kids open up to me. But for me, it's nice seeing 30, 40, 50-year-old men and women open up to me, because of course that's the hardest part. When you're a kid and you're diagnosed with autism, you can get that help. But having a 40-year-old or 50-year-old coming up to me and say, look, I've lived my whole life, not knowing what's wrong with me, and I've been diagnosed with autism now, and that's because of you, and it's a superpower. And they've gone and got a job, they've gone and played for their football team, whatever it is. And it's very, very powerful to, it's nice winning a title, but it's nice to be able to use this autism now to a positive than it was a negative. So.
I'll tell you what, Tom, you've done some powerful stuff in the competition space, but your description of harnessing autism in a positive fashion, both of you using clinical psychology as a proactive tool, there'll be a huge ripple effect of those conversations that you can already see doing good, but that will continue to go a long way. So that is stunning. I've got to talk about energy because that's why we're here today. And is there any greater exhibition of energy than lifting 5 Atlas stones in front of a world audience? But I've got to address you separately. You are the Stoltman brothers, but you're also 2 individuals. So, we start the show traditionally by looking at how you feel your overall energy is, with sort of 100 being unlimited energy across all domains, physical, emotional, mental, and 0, sort of being clinically dead. So taking those two benchmarks, where are you, Luke, at the moment?
So I think today probably I'm a little bit lower than I normally am, because normally I start a day with a swim, my cold water swim. So when I do that, my energy is high. My energy, I feel good, I think good, and I see good. But because we're down in the big city, I haven't been able to get a swim in this morning, so it's probably a little bit lower. Normally I'd say energy after a swim, like initially straight after, I'm like, everything's just like 100%. Everything just feels like so clear, so like just awake and energized. And then it takes a little bit of a lull.
If I had to average it over the last 6 weeks, because I want to talk about that behavior in a minute, because it's a hot topic, ironically, and it's very relevant.
Yeah, I'd probably say about 60. On average, I think 60. Which, the majority of energy is high, but then sometimes I have a lull in my day-to-day life. So that's I need to take accountability and look after myself, and hopefully we'll find out how that goes with the tests.
Well, we've got this piece of data we're going to come to in a minute, which is relevant. I think that, again, that's a great score. And again, a lot of people will connect with that. They'll also see you, again, winning Europe's Strongest Man, competing at the top table in this global sport, and say, I thought this was going to be 100, but I think very few people are, and exploring where that 40 lies will be a really interesting part of the rest of the chat. So brilliant. Tom, we know you're competitive. You don't give us 61.
No, I think I was going to say about 55, 60 as well. I think my energy levels and my motivation will be right down to about 55, 60, I think.
Let's think about the things that you consistently do that bring positive energy into your life. So thinking of sort of 3 habits or behaviors that have a strong connection with improved energy. Luke, you've fundamentally started with one, which is this morning dip. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's basically that. I get up in the morning. I like to see a sunrise. I believe, you go back to the primal ages of humankind, of us. We used to worship the sun. We used to worship when the sun came up. Oh my God, the sun's here. We're getting warmth. We're getting heat. We're getting light. The darkness isn't there. So for me, when I see that, I get that boost. But then put that on top of being in the sea, in the cold water, with the waves. That's energy right there. You're getting hit by the waves, or something's a calm day. There's not as much energy in the sea. But when you feel Mother Nature and that energy, it makes you feel like a grain of sand. You're nothing in the big picture, and that's very humbling. But it also gives you energy for me. It just really gives me energy. So that's how I start my day. And then that ties into, the rest of the day. Then training for me, going to the gym, like another huge release of dopamine, that hit, that boost. After that, after you have a good training session or just some form of physical activity, that gives me that energy. And, I've been looking into the last kind of year and a half, 2 years, doing these mantras and kind of chants. We go on a Thursday night, and after that, we normally do 2.5 hours, so 7 till 10. Normally I'm in bed by 9 o'clock, but after we do this on a Thursday night, I'm just like frothing with energy. It's insane. Chanting, like, again, it goes back to like the start of time, vibration, like sound vibration. If you get at that, the beats per minute or beats per second in the drum, when you hear that unlocks something, and the vibrations from the drums, from the chanting, from the when you're chanting that with people in an enclosed space, that gives you a lot of energy, or it does for me anyway, in my journey. So that's kind of three things, that I get a lot, like noticeably a lot. Obviously from food in a more basic, I guess, physiological way, you get that energy from food. But for me, the most noticeable are those three type of things I do.
I love those three. So we got the cold water immersion in nature. Again, we'll look at some data and see whether we can see ripples of that. We've got training, which again, movement. I think you've built your lives around it, but great to hear it's still energizing. I would have said, someone listening, certainly to the frequency of your voice and knowing the size of you and the power of you, might be surprised about the 2 hours of Thursday night chanting.
Yeah.
Me, not so much. I love it, and I think anyone who listened to that glimpse of an is probably going to try and tap you up for some kind of audio book where you just repeatedly. But that again is really reflecting some of the broader reach of well-being, but something that has come down through generations, and this concept of frequencies and breath work and community. I think, again, there's a lot of people who will be delighted to hear you bring those three things up, Luke, because they're not what people, I think, might have expected. So let's, again, potentially dive into some of those in more detail in a bit, but brilliant three.
Imagine this. There's one simple thing you could add to your daily routine that could help you sleep better, feel less anxious, and even support your hormone balance, all without having to change too much else in your life. That sounds too good to be true, right? Well, here's the kicker. 75% of us are missing out on it. Not because it's rare, but because it's incredibly difficult to get enough of this from our diet alone. It's something our bodies can't store long term, which means we need to replenish it every single day. The foods that used to give us plenty, leafy greens, seeds, whole grains, they just don't have the same levels in them anymore. So who is this mystery hero? It's magnesium. And here's the best part. It's really easy to add it to your routine through a quality supplement, just once a day. Having researched this supplement for years, I personally use Pure Sports Ultra Magnesium. Across their supplement range, every batch is tested, so you can trust that it's clean, simple, and extremely effective. So I highly recommend them. For 10% off, you can use the exclusive Energy Equation discount on their site, puresport.co. Use the code EE10 at checkout.
Tom, I sense we're not going to get the exact same three.
None of that kind of stuff. The training's going to be the same, obviously, but I think for me, my main one for myself is routine. I think, obviously with autism as well, when I'm in a routine and when I've got my days planned out to a T, my energy levels are up to their highest. I feel like, kind of look what you did with the cold water. My days are all good. My energy is good. Everything about my life is so good. So, yeah, I think routine for me 100% is where my energy comes at its highest, and that then helps my life with the training, with loved ones, etc. So that's a nice simple one there. And obviously, of course, training. I mean, when you're going into the gym and you're lifting those kind of weights, you're listening to that kind of hype music that you like, and you're just there. You feel your energy levels you're unmatched there as well. I think obviously we do that every single day. It's our bread and butter, but it also just gives us that really good vibes. We go out the gym smiling, we're full of energy. And then the third one, it's not the chanting kind of stuff. I think I just like chilling out with my wife. I think that's very important. I think for myself, myself and Luke have been brought up with family, and me and my wife have the kind of same interests. I traveled, I do a lot of things with her, and she keeps my energy levels high. So I think I just involve her as much in my life as I can, and routine, the gym, and having her involved in my life. Those three things really, really do help me keep my energy levels to an absolute height, and kind of just helps me keep energetic every single day. So
it's a brilliant three. And again, from a physiology background, we can reduce energy to cells and and activity and sleep, but we glean most of our energy from connection. And so for you to have that in your top three, again, a bit like yours, Luke, is what I love to hear, and others might not expect. But you're putting together a series of behaviors that's enabling you to compete at the top. So it's got to be broader than maybe some people might imagine. If we flip the coin and say, look, there's things that rob us of energy, can we think of a couple each of things that you have either eliminated from your life or consciously worked to reduce that rob you of energy, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, in my younger days, I guess, going out, kind of drinking. We rarely drink now. Not saying it's bad, it's just a choice as an athlete. I understand that it doesn't benefit me when I drink, when I go out and party. And if I'm not holding myself accountable, I think that's a big thing for me. If I'm lacking in the gym, lacking in my diet, because these are all my checklists that I need to, right, you're doing diet right, training right, cold water, I touched on that already, I've not done that this morning, so I'm not as energised, I'm not as clear as sometimes I should be. And that's my thing, it's taking accountability. I think that's something I try and pride myself on, but I am only human, and sometimes for whatever reason, whatever excuses I deem to be acceptable on the day that I don't take accountability, I then don't feel as energised, or it's beautiful that we have each other to kind of rely on almost. So say if Tom's not feeling so good or I'm not feeling so good, Tom will be like, right, I'm in the gym now. I'm like, right, okay, geez, I better go then. I didn't want to go, but I'm in my bed, not doing anything. I got to get up because Tom's in the gym. He kind of holds me accountable, and vice versa, So I think that is good. But on the days that I don't manage to train, that's when I feel really lackluster and kind of just disappointed in myself, I think, a lot of the time, yeah. When we train together, energy, we get energy again, community, it's that energy force. When we compete together, we have that energy. So again, something that takes away my energy is when Tom's not there. I'm probably the same.
Yeah,
100%.
Brilliant example. And I think it ties into that concept that sometimes performance is a different objective to well-being. You're creating the ability to weather the storm, which isn't ideal from a looking after you perspective, but it replicates what you're going to face in that competition environment. So a great example. Tom, for you, similar? Or,
yeah, I mean, obviously the drink one's massive. I think, I had to stop doing that, because obviously if you're partying every weekend and, you're lacking the sleep, you're lacking recovery, so it's a domino effect when you're doing the drinking stuff. So, but also, one thing that I've kind of learned as well for myself is stressful and negative people. I keep them out of my life, because for myself, I've had a lot of, I used to suffer a lot with stress all the time. My life used to be stressed with, the autism and stuff, and never knew how to control it. And I didn't realise I had negative and stressful people in my life. So, once I removed them, in my whole life again, the energy levels went up. My life was much easier, and now I know how to do that. So yeah, I think that's a massive one for myself, is keeping them to a side and not having anything to do with them, even though they could be, friends or something. It's just that negative people, the stressful people, and have your close circle. And that's all you need, is a close circle. And that's what I've learned now is, I've got 2 or 3 people I can trust. I've got 2 or 3 people that, want to see the best me, are there for me from when I was young to now. And I just, the other people they're just kind of a bad wave. I just wave them away. So.
That's a brilliant example. Again, removing those people who drain you of energy. If you don't answer my calls after this podcast, then I'll have a sense of where I sit on the spectrum.
I'll answer you every day.
So I think that those are brilliant and transferable cues. So I think they're brilliant, both of you. To give people a shape of lifestyle, before we get into your data, it'd be great to just get a feel of what the demands of this life are. Training is a good place to start. Without, again, we're speaking to lay people predominantly. You say you're training 5 days a week. Can you give us a sense, Luke, to start off with what that volume looks like?
The training aspect. So I've looked at my body. My body's got a couple of niggles and stuff. So, and physically, I'm not getting hugely stronger, but I'm looking at the technical side of things a little bit more. So we've included that into the training aspect more. So, like we said, Monday to Friday. So Monday for me is it's an overhead press day. That'll take up maybe 2.5, 3 hours in the gym.
So the whole day will be on that one movement.
One movement, yeah, and it's like assistance exercises. It's a bit of mobility, but I'll come in, do a warm up, do the assault bike. 90 seconds on, 60 seconds off, do that 3 sets. Then I'll do some movement prep that'll get my body ready to come in and lift press for that day.
Any idea how many sets you would put through your shoulders in a session?
So I was training yesterday, so I did 7 sets of 5 reps on the log press, I think it was. 5 sets of 5 with axle, then some dumbbell work, some cables, some bands, some kettlebell stuff. It's quite a lot.
There's a lot of people realising why they're not the world's strongest man at this exact moment in time, myself included.
It's a lot, you know. It's and you know what, it's for both Tom and I. We both train a lot. You know, it's intense. You don't just come in and do, you know, 3 sets of 10 and then that's you done. You know, you're trying to find those small percentages, and that's what I'm doing at this stage in my career now. Is you analyse yourself, right? I'm a little bit down on that. If I get 1 more rep there, or 5 seconds held on for 5 seconds longer, then that would get me first place. You know, so it's really small margins. So if I can claw that back in terms of like the technical side of things, or repair my body that's a little bit broken, then hopefully that'll help. We usually train each body part once a week. So it'll be Monday for me is pressing, Tuesday is like back day, deadlifts, Wednesday is like a conditioning day for me, Thursday is a leg day, and then Friday is a little bit more event based. So depending on what events we'd have coming up in a competition, train a bit more of them, and then I'm doing a little bit more shoulder focus as well, just again for that added recovery on a Friday. So I'm training about 3 hours a day at the moment. That's it. And then on top of that, recovery and diet and everything else, which is
incredible, which we'll absolutely come to.
Yeah.
So that, for most people listening, that's probably blown their mind a little in terms of the volume. You know, the 3 hours a day, you know, 5 days a week, you know, and the sheer volume of load you put into a single muscle group over that period of time. But of course, we're ending up with a strength capacity that others can't conceive. So it's not about outcome. Now we've got to fuel that somehow, right? So one of the things that I mentioned to you on the device is going to capture how many estimated calories you burn. So it knows your weight. You're happy that I share your weights? I think they're in public domain. So Tom's at 185 kilograms, Luke, a mere 165. Skinny by comparison.
Yeah.
Still, you know, some significant mass. Now we take that mass and then we put it through 3 hours of exercise. There's some calories burned. So the machine estimated on you know 2 of the days that you were doing this, you're burning over 10,000 calories.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Jeez. We take up our cardio and take a bit
Well,
more.
you know,
So get on top of the nutritionist.
So you know, there's a sense there of just the sheer volume. Bear in mind, you know, the average male would probably, again, it's a bit conservative, burn 2,500 calories a day. So, you know, are we saying you're 4 times the average male? You know, maybe we are. But, you know, we were talking before that the food bill must be intense. But getting that volume of food in, you know, clearly the volume you're eating is right because you're meeting your performance targets. You're not losing weight. So, you know, you're working with a nutritionist who's got that well under control. Is there a challenge in the volume? You know, do you have to eat all the time?
I think Luke would agree with this. I think eating's the hardest part of it. I mean, in itself, that's a job because it's not like the gym where you can go for 2 or 3 hours. You're literally eating every 2 hours of the day. So, yeah, you know, I mean, you know, we get up at 8 a.m. and have, it's not just like, you know, that we eat a Bix and porridge. You're eating 10 eggs plus, and then the sides on top of that. And then at 10 o'clock, you're eating 12, 2, 4, 6. And then my last meal's about 8 or 9 o'clock. So, you know, it's, the volume in itself. I mean, you know, when you're eating burgers now, it just tastes like you're eating lettuce every single day. You're just like, I don't want to put this in my mouth, but it's fuel, and that's how you kind of have to train your mind to think like, you know, we're not eating this because it's our choice. We're eating it because it helps us be the best, you know, the best in what we're doing. And I think if you have that mindset going into it, it really helps you because, you know, when I first took my nutritionist on and they told me to eat 8-9 eggs, I was like, are you taking the mic? Because this is bonkers. But then, yeah, when you start saying, you know, it's for the kind of for what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, we eat a lot of volume. I mean, like, what is it, kilogram meat or something? Kilo meat a day, and you know, it's harder because you're not. I think people think strongmen just eat burgers and chips and all the processed stuff every single day, and that's easy to eat 9,000-10,000 calories. But to eat 8,000 to 10,000 calories of, you know, steaks, chicken, fish, rice, potatoes. everybody knows it's hard to do. So yeah, I think, we get a cheat meal before the gym, and that's our kind of big calorie dense meal. So we need more fuel when we're in the gym. So that's the reason we can train for 2-3 hours, because you can eat chicken and rice, but it won't digest as quick as eating big burger and big chips and then a bit of pudding and going to the gym. You'll have more energy to go into the gym. So that's kind of the cheat meal we have when we're in off season, not doing training prep. But apart from that, everything else is as clean as it can be. So
really interesting. And you feel that volume has changed your enjoyment of food. Is that true for you as well, Luke? That a burger tastes like lettuce?
I wouldn't say less. I've tasted some tasty burgers. I think, in the build up, when we're in the most extreme end of our diets, that's really difficult, because you're eating a lot of calorie dense meals, so in the form of more fast foods, big bowls of pasta, pizza, cheesecake. And although that sounds really nice, when you're doing it, again, it's for energy. It's purely for energy. That's all we're doing it for, because you can't physically get, if you're eating clean, like boiled chicken, boiled rice and some veg, that's not going to fuel your body. Like you said, the data says up to 10,000 calories getting burnt. So we need to get those calories back in us as quick as we can, so we can go again for the following day. So if we're eating just the boiled food, plain food, like the bodybuilders do, or like other athletes do, we wouldn't be able to recover. So that's why we do that. But then after that, week-long diet of that, all you want to do is come home and have a salad. That's all you just want. I crave like fruit or watermelon, or just something just tasty, light, and just refreshing. So usually after we compete at, say, World's Strongest Man, we come back, have a week of just detox, basically, just of a light kind of diet, because again, it's really stressful in your body eating that amount of kind of calorie dense food. So you just have a little break, and then you go back in and you build up to that extreme end of the diet again, and then it's tapering. It's up and down all the time. We couldn't sit here and talk to you if we were still on that diet, so it just wouldn't be possible. So we do try and eat as well as we can, but sometimes it does get a bit tedious, the enjoyment of food. When you're eating 350 grams of rice, potatoes and veg, 3 times a day, it gets a little bit kind of, stale.
It's a lot. I've got to ask a semi-crude question as a physiologist. Bowel motions? How do we get it out? Is it one?
I mean,
is it one big one?
I don't have a problem with bowel movements. I think I'm probably, it says 5 a day keeps the doctor away. That's what I do on the toilet. I do about 5 or 6 a day, I'll be honest. So.
Tom's got a habit of going to, whenever he goes to a new place.
New place, I mark my territory. Just like dogs
dog.
do, when they pee on...
So I check the toilets in the studio.
The toilets as well for breaking toilet seats, because I'm so high up. I slam down on them instead of obviously placing myself down. So.
Now, a lot of movement, a lot of eating, a lot of going on. We touched on recovery earlier. We've got things like cold water immersion, which has risen to the fore at the recovery discussion. The biggest opportunity for recovery is sleep. Again, before we get into your data, which I'm keen to do, from a sleep perspective, are you using that as a primary performance tool? How's your sleep, Tom?
I sort of struggle, when the room's not the right temperature, I wake up once or twice a night as well. And I think being the bigger guy as well, obviously it's going to be affected by it. But usually I think for me I know if I've not slept well, if my training is wrong, and that's how I kind of know, first thing in the morning, if I'm tired till about 12, 1 o'clock, if I feel kind of that lethargic feeling until about 12 o'clock, then I know it's because of the sleep the day before. So I always kind of judge my training off the sleep.
I sleep okay, but I think from my personal experience in my old job when I was working on oil rigs, it was I wasn't getting enough sleep. I knew I wasn't getting enough sleep. So, but you pick up those habits just carry on through to this life that we're living now, so I try and go to bed early, but then I'm usually up maybe 5 in the morning, 4 or 5 in the morning, depending on what time I go to sleep, and I just get up then. That's my body alarm clock kind of setting, waking myself up from those oil rig days. And then I would my fix would be then to have caffeine, coffee, which again isn't a good way of doing that. So I used to maybe have a few cups of coffee offshore on the oil rigs. That would keep me going. I'd have a coffee before a train, go and train. I'd go to sleep offshore about 11 o'clock and wake up about 4 o'clock in the morning again, and that would be the routine. So I think my sleep as well as Tom's, it's probably not the greatest.
It's data time. I've held off the data long enough. I can feel that if I hold it much longer,
call an ambulance, boys.
My existence may be a threat. Yeah, call an ambulance, but not for me. So we're gonna have a look at the data. Again, the device you wore looked to capture heart rate variability, which is going to tell us about how you're managing with stress. So we look at the body and say, look, it's got the ability to expend energy and recoup energy. And we look at the balance of something called your autonomic nervous system over the 3 days you wore the device. And in layman's terms, we look at how often your body was ready for some kind of threat and how often it was recouping energy and not worried about there being anything that might threaten it. So true recovery certainly means the absence of stimulus, the absence of being ready for threat. So we're going to look at that figure. We're going to look separately at sleep and say, from the hours you were asleep, what was the quality of recovery? So sleep does many, many things, many of which we understand, many of which we still don't. But we know it's a big opportunity to restore energy and recoup energy. So we're going to see whether your sleep was hitting the mark from that fact. And then we get this look at your movement levels, which we've already seen the calorie output of that. But we also get a marker of cardiovascular fitness called VO2 max, which is, again, not an area of fitness that you specifically work on, but it's an area of fitness that has relevance to energy and certainly has relevance to well-being and health above and beyond your performance requirements. So those are the key parameters. The system is going to score you out of 100 against those 3 areas: stress, if you like, sleep, and fitness. Who's going to score better?
I'd hope Tom does, because
I'm young.
He's younger and he's world's strongest man. So
let's see. If I don't score better, then
based on that theory,
I'll give Luke my titles there.
That is a bold, incredible moment.
So confident.
So he is confident.
Humble.
I'm going to show you the results. With that level of confidence, I am delighted to say that you have nudged it, Tom.
Oh, there we go.
And actually, your key point there: age makes a big difference. Your physiology through youth is more flexible, it's more pliable, and that 10-year gap between you means that for you to have the same levels of recovery, fitness and sleep as Tom, you will have to work a lot harder. And as we look at some of your habits and behaviors, we already recognize that you've got more things in play because you've evolved to add them in, whereas you, Tom, have noted quite clearly you don't feel you need those things yet. And that may well be true. So scores on the doors. We've got Tom recording a magnificent 59, which fits so neatly with your self-predicted score. You put it 55 to 60.
Okay, that's cool.
What was that for?
That's his overall score. So overall
good.
Score 59.
Mine's is -10.
Which is cracking. Yours at 40.
Okay.
So again, when we look at these things, these are not bad scores, and fundamentally we're not scoring you in a competitive sense. I jest with you both at my own peril, but I jest because, there's the natural competitive edge between you. But what we're really looking at is how this data relates to what can we learn from it about how we optimize your lifestyle, what's working and what might be areas of more considered attention. So don't worry too much about the scores. So let me show you those results up close. So just to prove that I'm not fibbing to you both, there's Tom's score with this 59 out of 100. And within that, we look at these 3 different scores that exist within there. So we look at the stress and recovery balance, with, again, 100 being our ideal. And we've got a 53 there. We've got the restorative power of sleep at 69, which interestingly is your strongest area.
Jesus Christ. Oh.
And then it's got your physical activity at 56. And there's a reason for that. It missed some of the activity that you did. So you actually, on the days where the device recorded clean data, you unsurprisingly scored 100 out of 100 on your physical activity.
Shocked about the sleep for me.
Well, the sleep is interesting. So let's come to those in more detail in a second. Let's just immediately put Luke out of his misery and say, again, for you, it's captured that activity level. So you've got a 92 score there, which is extremely strong because the volume and quality of movement is exceptional. Your sleep at 24
gives us insight that that's not as restorative as we'd like. And interestingly there, we've got a very different picture between some of the nights measured. So we've got one really good night and then one really bad night. So I want to look at that in more detail in a second. And then on this concept of stress and recovery, which draws us back to how often your body's ready for some kind of threat, the answer with you is most of the time.
He's under threat.
That's mad. That's because of working with him.
Yeah. I'm cool, calm and breezy, as it said.
See if we could have
It's working with him.
we'd retest again and Tom's in another country, I'd be like, oh.
We could run that experiment, but I think, and again, everything in life is a yin and a yang. So
That's
benefits and
5 out of
costs.
100, by the way.
You have to do that ma thing about 3 or 4 times to keep that stress levels down. Cold water needs to be up to 10 times a week.
I need to be in a cold tub all the time.
We may want more cold, we may want more OMS.
That's the one, not ma.
Well, again, you're 2 of the top performing athletes in your space in the world. And the outcome of that is elite level performance. So let's also be clear that these results don't define us. What they do is raise an interesting discussion around those concepts of recovery and around that concept of sleep. So the common denominator with both of you, if I look at where does the data match? So you didn't score brilliantly on your stress and recovery. When we look at these results, what we get, if I bring up a timeline, is when your body's ready for some kind of threat or physiologically you're primed to be taking action or alert or physically switched on, we see red on the graph. When you're physically active, we see blue on the graph. So it distinguishes between whether your physiology is revved up because you're thinking about something or your physiology is revved up because you're doing something. When your body is in the opposite state, what we call physiological recovery, we see green on the graph. And that's really, if I charge my iPhone, for a period of time, that's you charging your body. Other brands are available. But fundamentally, the green is recharging, the red and the blue are expending. And the common trait between both of you is that from the minute you wake up pretty much to the minute you go to sleep, you're red. And that's even more significant with you actually, Luke, in terms of when you're on, you are on.
Oh, geez.
So the height of the red line also indicates how dominant that nervous system is. In technical terms, we're measuring here something called the sympathetic nervous system, and it's running the inside of you. We've got this brilliant training block here, clearly identified. But to a certain extent, again, and we may be capturing the back end of your cold water immersion in the morning there, you are on it until you're off it. And actually on this day, which was the second day, that's the 24-hour cycle. So that includes your sleep. And that's not an uncommon result in people who are not only, under the pressures of the training volume, but let's also be clear, you're building the Stoltman brand globally, you're running businesses, you've got a commercial gym, that's in operation. So, the question here would be, at what point from sort of sunrise to sunset or from waking to sleeping, does your body believe there's nothing it needs to worry about? And the answer from the data is not often.
Not often, yeah.
Does that feel true?
Pretty much, yeah.
And when I see a result like that, I go to immediately, this person would naturally be drawn to activities that down-regulate this response, of which humming is an incredibly powerful one. So you, again, moving to mantras and again, use of Om. Cold water is an incredible one. So what I love, having received this data before we've caught up, is you are bringing in the antidotes to this already. And that doesn't mean they're not working. What we say is, well, what would this look like without those?
We're dead.
You wouldn't be dead. But, there's certainly a fundamental part of you being propped up. Do you have any sort of nighttime rituals, Luke, that help you clear that mental inbox before you hit the hay?
Not overly, no, but I think it's... Yeah. No, my mind's normally pretty active a lot of the time, with work, and it's a busy time at the moment, so I need the work to be okay, need to compete, body's getting older, panic. It's like, maybe that's subconsciously, that's probably kind of coming into my head, I think, a lot of the time.
I think that's a brilliant analysis. Anything that makes us worried about the future is counterintuitive to sleep. It's anything that keeps you one eye on the world is more likely to lead to this type of pattern because you're ready to jump out of bed and solve it. If you sleep in a strange environment, you won't sleep as well. Maybe someone's coming in through the door. Is the child breathing in the night? What if I didn't send that email that needed to do? So actions and behaviors that sort of clear your mental inbox in that last hour might be worth considering. And equally, we can drop temperature here. Do you ever do showers or baths in the evening as part of that wind down regime?
Not overly.
I shower.
I shower, yeah. Sorry, shower at night, yeah.
Yeah. As in part of your wind down regime or post exercise?
Well, post exercise usually, yeah.
Yeah. So if you have a lukewarm shower or bath, actually that can help that
I
drop
shower
that
at
core
like 8
temperature.
o'clock at night.
That could be great.
So drop the temperature, not have it scalding hot.
Yeah, so you want it lukewarm and then to a certain extent let yourself air dry. That again can help that temperature drop a little.
Right, okay.
But I think, again, what we know is you wake up the next day and you deliver performance again. The following night, still not great, but a pocket of better recovery. And not at a point where I'd say, oh, hang on, what's going on? I do think, it's logical to ensure that this you mentioned the word sleep apnea earlier, where people somehow sort of close off their airways and have little pockets where they gasp themselves awake. It's not always as obvious as big gasps that alert partners. It's not always as obvious as snoring so loud that the neighbors sort of come over. So, if you were being clinically robust, you'd go, be nice to just run that past your local GP and have them exclude that there's any challenge there. But I think, what we've got is, if you're not doing things that naturally drop your core temperature, if you're not clearing your mental inbox, then we've got a great roadmap to some things that might give you more energy restoration. I'll flip back over to you, Tom, because again, that sort of relevant piece. One of the things you mentioned, which was really interesting, is this volume of eating frequency. When I think of the digestive system, it's associated. The rest and digest nervous system is very different to the one involved in fight or flight, because one nervous system slows down my heart rate, moves blood into my stomach. One nervous system moves blood into my muscles, increases my heart rate. So digestion and physical activity and stress have always been counterintuitive to each other because they're quite opposite physical states. What I don't see on either of your graphs is pockets of eating, as in I don't see when you eat, as in your body doesn't go into recovery for those meals. So I don't know, would it be fair to say that you eat quite quickly? Yeah, and I mentioned that because you've accurately described eating as having to become fueling, right? To sustain 185 kilograms of tissue, in your case, Tom, requires this huge volume of calories. But we also have to remember eating is more than fueling. It also is culturally and sort of emotionally connected with unwinding. And one of the challenges is how do we reconnect with the power of eating so that I see calm in your day? There's a reason the French take 2 hours for lunch, and there'll be French people going, I don't take 2 hours for lunch. But that sort of cultural sense of chewing, engaging, giving yourself a break from the noise. Eating can be a really powerful modulator of that. So one point for you, Tom, but it's the same on yours, Luke, is I can't see those meals. And if you went to a very expensive European well-being retreat, they'll give you some stale bread and they'll make you chew it. And you'll probably go, I feel quite good. You'll be overcharged for the bread.
Right.
But, the power of chewing and only focusing on eating and connection may be another interesting area for both of you to bring more energy recovery in the day. So that on your pattern is certainly true on both. So we've got this sort of collective Stoltman thing that you're on all day and then you're off. What we see with you, Tom, is a much better transition into sleep. So your sleep score is pretty good. This night in particular, from when you again were deemed to go to bed, you went straight into recovery and you stayed in recovery right until morning. So again, that in many ways you can get away without having much recovery in the day because your sleep is your backup option. There's good recovery. One my favorite graph on these things is where we look at your sort of overall energy levels, and we think of you like a battery. And we say, look, over the course of the 3 days, if we take the idea that you started at, as having enough energy, when you're awake, you decrease your energy levels, and then when you sleep, you recharge your energy levels. And what we're interested in is that over the end of the 3-day period, you end up where you started or even higher. Right. And your chart shows that your recovery at the moment, Tom, is sufficient to keep you delivering the level of energy expenditure that you've got in place. It doesn't mean it's optimum, but it's sufficient, as Zach can see there. If I do the equivalent graph for you, Luke, you might be described as an overspender.
Oh, geez, that. I've got 9. I'm going on fumes.
And again, we can run on fumes for a long time, right? So this isn't, anything concerning, because the human body is designed for periods where we have inadequate recovery, right? We're designed for tolerating the fatigue of childbearing and child rearing. We're designed for famines and wars. So the body doesn't need this, if you like, current account to be paid off every single day. But it's an observation. And here again, we find that sweet spot between performance and well-being in the fact that, you are enabling performance. But if I was responsible for your well-being, I'd want some of these actions and habits to creep in. And what I'm delighted about, Luke, is that you're already adding in probably some of the best ones. Does that make sense as a
I think would it, because it's been busy. It's been a really busy time, and I think from I know how my head works. So in a busy time at work, like that's all I'm for. I'm like, right, I need to go in the office. I need to do this, do that, and you're kind of constantly, your mind's always switched on. So I guess when it's that busy time, that's when I'm not getting into that sleep. I'm waking up thinking about things. I need to check that or check this, and it just doesn't.
You're thinking was work as number one, aren't you, right now? Because that's what I'm the opposite in it, because I'm a strongman athlete, so I'll wake up, train, and then the work comes second or third to me, and I think that's why I can control it a bit more. But yeah, I think Luke, it's like he said, it's office work or it's an email like that. But with me, it's like that waits. I know I've got a concrete and vision of strongman. I'm a strongman first and foremost, and the rest comes after that. So
I think it's a really clean example, Tom. The more different things we have to manage, the more likely we are to overthink them or let them on a low level just keep me in that stimulus status. So I think, when I look at the things you're doing, and again, you're doing the strongman piece as well as all the additional bits, Luke, that's not a surprising result. And there'll be lots of people listening to this who will feel they're juggling 2 jobs, domestic challenges, plus all the stresses of the world. So this is a common pattern in people. The question is which mechanisms to sort of to break it a little bit. And for you, again, when we look at the patterns, there's not that clean sort of pre-sleep. I can't see in the hour and a half before you go to bed that recovery kick in. It's not like, oh, that's the moment Luke lets go of the day and is showing compassion to himself or is focused on pleasure and energy restoration.
Right.
So that often gets called sleep hygiene, this sort of last 90 minutes of the day. But it's also about really finding yourself in the moment. Out of this, we had another marker of cardiovascular fitness, which I've talked to you both about a bit off camera. So when we look at fitness, there's different types of fitness, and of course the word fitness itself is about purpose. Fit for what? Fit to be a strong man. You both got 100 out of 100. When we look at fitness and well-being, slightly different, that your strength is separate to your body's mobility, which is also separate to your body's ability to promote endurance or stamina. They're different, if you like, systems of biology. And when I see both of you lift Atlas stones, I know you've got 100 out of 100 for strength, and I know you got not far off in mobility. That ability to squat, deadlift, all those functional movement patterns are beautiful. When I measure your cardiovascular fitness, I look at something called VO2 max, which is how much oxygen you can get to each kilogram of your body. And I like people to have a figure above 40, which is 40 milliliters of oxygen per kilogram per minute. Now, the crucial word in there is per kilogram, right? And this is the reason when we look at endurance, really a defining feature of endurance is how much oxygen that person can get against their body weight.
Right.
So you've got to get Tom, oxygen to 185 kilograms, you 165, Luke. So for you to have the same fitness as me, you'd need to have more than double the size of heart, lung, cardiovascular capacity, for example. So I want the figure above 40. We've got another absolute margin call here between the two of you. We've got you clocking in, Tom, at 38, and you just below Luke at 37, which I actually felt gutted. Just because I wanted you to get that one.
Let's go to the VAR on that one, I think.
Let's go.
I'm not too sure about that.
But actually, when we discussed your aerobic capacity, your stamina, you both felt pretty similar. And again, an area that when we talk about your training, long endurance type work, cardiovascular work, isn't prevalent in your training. You do lots of conditioning, that high intensity interval style work. I think, again, when we look at that fitness against your mass, I'm not aware of what figures are for strong men, but I can't imagine it'd be much higher than that in any population. But that does raise the question, post-retirement, to have a high level of that fitness, 185, 165 kilograms is a tough ask. Tough ask. The real learning from this for me is you gentlemen train incredibly. There's huge volumes of physical activity, and we could dive into that for days on here. You've got extraordinary output metrics of the training you do and the performances you can command. But if I was drawing a summary, I'd say an increased focus in mindful eating and slowing down to chew those meals despite the fact that they've gone very lettucey. A commitment to the cold, a commitment to breath work and humming and chanting, certainly for you, Luke, is so valid. And a commitment to unwinding is a worthwhile proactive strategy. And I don't see any of those things anything but adding to the performance sphere, but certainly when we move into you looking after you two as individuals, for the long term, they're worth considering. Gentlemen, you've been a dream to have on this podcast. I followed you. I think the point when you won the first title, Tom, and you were screaming, my son and I were up on our feet, and like many people across the world, loving not only your accomplishment but the relationship between the two of you, and the fact that you were right there, next to your brother, having competed in the same finals. These are extraordinary things, and it's been a real privilege to understand more about the demands of your lifestyle and understand the sacrifices you've had to get there. Tom, for you, the representation of autism, and I have many friends and parents of children with autism who will be, overwhelmed to hear about how you've turned it into a positive, how physical activity has harnessed it and routines support it. So thank you for that enormously. And Luke, again, you really stretching the boundaries of what people might associate with a strong man, from Invergordon and things that people might think are floaty and lefty. But, I'm promising you are robust. I'm promising you as well, Tom, they're robust and they're evidence-based. And I think they're the beginning of an increasing relationship with recovery and self-compassion. So it's been a real pleasure to have you both on.
It's been also really good. Going to go back and start to be more relaxed. Be grateful for today.
I'll teach you, don't you worry. Stress-free Tom Stoltman.
No, thanks for having us on. It's been really good. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks both.
Cheers, yeah.
Great.
Thanks so much for watching The Energy Equation. We love having you on this journey with us, and stay tuned because we've got some iconic guests coming up. In fact, here's a sneak peek of who's coming on the show.
I'm very energetic about life and what the day can bring me.
You're finding a bit more purpose in giving other people energy.
100%, yeah. I used to think of energy as being coffee. I used to think of energy as being fitness. My definition of energy has changed.
I'm genuinely really excited to talk to you today.